I'll never forget the night it started, the scratching. It was subtle at first, like a rat in the walls, but it grew, becoming more insistent, more desperate. I lived alone in the old Renfield manor then, a crumbling relic of Victorian grandeur, inherited from a distant, eccentric uncle. Everyone said the place was cursed, haunted by the whispers of its previous owner, a man named, well, Renfield. I scoffed at the local legends, of course, until the scratching began. The next night it was worse. Not just scratching, but a low, guttural growling like a caged animal. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I paced the creaking floorboards, clutching a rusty poker, my only defense against the unknown horror lurking within the walls. The growling intensified, punctuated by the frantic scrabbling. I began to question my sanity. Was it all in my head, a product of the oppressive silence and the chilling local tales? Curiosity, or perhaps madness, finally won. I found the key to the West Wing hidden behind a loose brick in the library. My hand trembled as I slid it into the lock, the cold metal biting into my skin. The growling and scratching ceased abruptly. A chilling silence descended, broken only by the creak of the heavy oak door as I pushed it open. The air inside was thick with the scent of decay and something metallic. The West Wing was a mausoleum of forgotten memories. Cobwebs draped like shrouds over decaying furniture, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and something else, something sickeningly sweet. The moonlight filtering through the grimy windows painted the room in shades of grey and black, revealing strange symbols scrawled on the walls in what looked like dried blood. I found a diary on a small table, its leather cover cracked and brittle. It belonged to Renfield himself. The entries were rambling, filled with disturbing accounts of a master he served, a being of immense power and insatiable hunger. He wrote of providing his master with sustenance. The words blood and flies appeared frequently, sending a shiver down my spine. Deeper into the wing, I discovered a hidden chamber. A cold draft emanated from within, raising goosebumps on my arms. My heart pounded in my chest. I hesitated, a primal fear gripping me. But the scratching started again, louder now, more frantic, coming from inside the chamber. I had to know. I pushed the chamber door open. The stench that hit me was overwhelming, the cloying sweetness of blood mixed with the putrid odor of decay. In the center of the room, bathed in a single shaft of moonlight, was a large, ornate coffin. The scratching came from within. My hand, as if possessed, reached for the coffin lid. The scratching grew more frenzied, accompanied by muffled thuds and gasps. I hesitated, fear warring with morbid curiosity. What lay within? What horror had my uncle kept locked away for so long? I threw back the heavy lid. The coffin was empty, except for a small, dusty pile of what looked like dried insects, flies. My stomach churned. Then I heard it, a low growl directly behind me. I spun around. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight, was a figure, tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed red in the darkness. Its lips curled back in a feral snarl, revealing long, sharp fangs. The creature lunged. I felt a searing pain in my neck, a burning sensation spreading through my veins like fire. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the ancient walls of the manor. I remember darkness closing in, the creature's hot breath on my face, the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth. Then, nothing. I awoke with a raging thirst, a craving I'd never known. The world seemed sharper, brighter. The scratching in the walls was gone, replaced by a low, humming satisfaction. I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back, its eyes glowing red, its skin pale and gaunt. Fangs elongated from my canines. The transformation was complete. The scratching returned, but this time it wasn't coming from within the walls. It was coming from within me, a hunger, a desperate craving for flies. I first heard whispers of the syndicate at a dimly lit bar, tucked away in the city's underbelly. A grizzled old man, his face etched with fear, muttered about stakes and crimson contracts. I dismissed it as drunken rambling then, just another urban legend. But that night, something shifted. A shadow flickered in my peripheral vision, too fast to be human. A chill colder than the winter air snaked down my spine. The old man's words echoed in my mind, and a seed of unease began to sprout. The following week, I found myself drawn back to the bar. The old man was gone, vanished without a trace. The bartender, a woman with eyes like chips of ice, simply shrugged when I asked about him. She served me a drink, her touch lingering a moment too long on my hand. I felt a prick, like a needle, but saw nothing. As I left, I noticed a small, crimson stain on my sleeve. It looked suspiciously like blood. The unease blossomed into full-blown dread. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the floorboard sent my heart racing. I started seeing them, fleeting glimpses of pale faces, eyes burning with an unnatural hunger, lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. They were always there, watching, waiting. I felt like a fly caught in a spider's web, the silken threads of fear tightening around me with each passing day. One night the shadows materialized. Two figures, impossibly tall and thin, stood in my doorway, their faces obscured by the dim light. I felt a paralyzing fear, a primal terror that rooted me to the spot. Their eyes, however, burned with a terrifying clarity, twin embers of crimson fire in the darkness. They didn't speak, but their presence screamed volumes. I was theirs. The crimson contract had been signed, sealed with my own blood. They dragged me to a hidden chamber beneath the city, a labyrinth of tunnels and forgotten spaces. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the stench of decay. Others were there, pale and silent, their eyes vacant and lifeless. They were the Syndicate's puppets, their wills broken, their bodies enslaved. I knew then that this was no ordinary vampire coven. This was something far more organized, far more sinister. They explained their purpose, their chillingly pragmatic approach to immortality. They weren't interested in power or domination. They wanted something far more insidious, sustainable survival. They had perfected a system, a horrific cycle of recruitment and sacrifice. New members were brought in, their blood harvested to sustain the older members, their bodies eventually discarded when they were no longer useful. I watched in horror as they prepared their next victim, a young woman who had unknowingly stumbled into their trap. Her fear mirrored my own, her eyes wide with terror as they bound her to a stake. I wanted to scream, to fight, but I was paralyzed by fear. I was next. I knew it. The crimson stain on my sleeve pulsed with a sickening heat. It was a brand, a mark of ownership. I was a part of the Syndicate now, whether I liked it or not. Days bled into weeks, each one a descent into deeper despair. I witnessed countless sacrifices, each one more horrific than the last. The metallic scent of blood became a constant companion, a sickening reminder of my own impending fate. I tried to find a way out, a glimmer of hope in the darkness, but the Syndicate's grip was too tight. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, a labyrinth of despair with no exit. One night they came for me. They strapped me to the stake, the cold wood pressing against my skin. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But then something unexpected happened. A scream echoed through the tunnels, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. It wasn't the scream of a victim, but the scream of a hunter. A figure emerged from the darkness, wielding a stake tipped with silver. It was the old man from the bar, his eyes burning with a righteous fury. He moved with a speed and strength I hadn't seen before, taking down the two figures with brutal efficiency. He then turned to me, his eyes softening with a strange mixture of pity and resolve. He released me, his hands surprisingly gentle. He explained that he was a hunter, part of a secret society dedicated to eradicating the Syndicate. He had been tracking them for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. He said he had sensed my resistance, my unwillingness to become one of them. He offered me a choice: join him in his fight or try to escape and hope they wouldn't find me. I chose to fight. He trained me, teaching me the ancient ways of the hunters, how to identify and exploit the Syndicate's weaknesses. I learned that the crimson stain wasn't a mark of ownership, but a beacon, a way for the Syndicate to track their potential victims. It was also a vulnerability, a way for us to track them. We spent months hunting them, one by one, liberating their captives and bringing the Syndicate's reign of terror to an end. We finally cornered the Syndicate's leader, a creature of immense power and cruelty, in the very chamber where I had been captured. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle for survival. But in the end, we prevailed. The old man drove a silver stake through the creature's heart, ending its reign of terror once and for all. We thought it was over, that we had won. But as we emerged from the tunnels, blinking in the sunlight, I noticed something. The crimson stain on my sleeve was gone. I looked at the old man, a question forming in my mind. He smiled, a chillingly familiar smile that sent a shiver down my spine. He touched my hand, his touch lingering a moment too long. I felt a prick, like a needle. I looked down and saw a small, crimson stain blooming on my sleeve. The old man's eyes glowed red in the sunlight. "The Syndicate," he whispered, his voice now deeper, more resonant, "needs new leadership." And as the world faded to black, I realized the horrifying truth. The hunt never ends, it just changes hands. I never believed in fairy tales, let alone vampires. That was until I met her. It started subtly. A chance meeting at a late-night cafe, her eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. She introduced herself as Ilara. Her voice was like velvet, soothing and dangerous all at once. There was something about her, something alluring, something off. She spoke of ancient texts, of hidden knowledge, of escaping the confines of time. I was skeptical, of course, but intrigued. She invited me back to her place, a Gothic mansion shrouded in mist on the edge of town. It felt like stepping into a time capsule, filled with antique furniture, dusty tapestries, and the scent of old books. Everything about her, about that place, screamed danger, yet I couldn't resist. It was like a moth drawn to a flame, a morbid curiosity driving me closer to the unknown. The air was thick with anticipation, a sense of something ancient and powerful lurking just beneath the surface. She offered me a drink, a deep red liquid that smelled of iron and something else, something I couldn't quite place. She called it the elixir of life. I hesitated. The smell was unsettling, primal, but her gaze held me captive. She took a sip herself, her eyes flickering with an almost predatory gleam. "Don't be afraid," she whispered, her voice a silken caress. "Embrace eternity." My hand trembled as I took the glass. The taste was metallic, coppery, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was intoxicating, a rush of energy surging through my veins. I felt powerful, alive in a way I never had before. But then came the burning. A searing pain ripped through my body, making me cry out. Ilara watched, a strange mixture of amusement and satisfaction in her eyes. "The transformation," she murmured, "is always unpleasant." I collapsed to the floor, my vision blurring. The world around me spun, the mansion's shadows twisting into grotesque shapes. I felt cold, emptier than I'd ever felt before. And then darkness. A deep, all-consuming blackness swallowed me whole. When I awoke, it was night. The mansion was silent, eerily still. I sat up, my head pounding. Something felt different. My senses were heightened, sharper. I could hear the rustling of leaves outside, the scurrying of rats in the walls, the faint beating of my own heart. It was unnerving. I looked down at my hands. They seemed paler, thinner. And then I saw it, the reflection in a dusty mirror. My eyes. They were red, burning red. Ilara appeared behind me, a knowing smile on her face. "Welcome," she purred, "to eternal life." I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a raspy whisper. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch sending a chill down my spine. "You are now one of us," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "One of the immortal." But there was no joy in her words, only a chilling emptiness. The first kill was difficult. The bloodlust was overwhelming, a primal urge I couldn't control. Ilara guided me, her voice a soothing whisper in the darkness. She showed me how to hunt, how to feed, how to survive. The memory of it still haunts me. The warm blood on my lips, the fading scream of my victim, the utter despair in their eyes as the life drained out of them. Decades blurred into centuries. We moved from town to town, shadows in the night, feeding on the unsuspecting. The initial thrill of immortality faded, replaced by a gnawing emptiness, a constant hunger that could never be truly satisfied. I watched as Ilara grew more and more detached, her humanity fading with each passing year. She became a predator, cold and calculating, and I became her shadow. One night while feeding, I saw her. A young woman, her eyes full of life, her laughter echoing in the night. She reminded me of someone Someone from a life I'd almost forgotten. A life before the darkness. The bloodlust subsided, replaced by a pang of regret, something I hadn't felt in centuries. I stopped. I couldn't bring myself to feed. Ilara watched me, her eyes narrowing. "What's wrong?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Lost your appetite?" I shook my head, unable to meet her gaze. I can't do this anymore." Her laughter echoed through the alley, cold and cruel. "You think you have a choice?" she sneered. "You are bound to me, to this existence forever." She lunged at me, her fangs bared, but I moved faster than I ever thought possible. Centuries of hunting had honed my reflexes, my strength. I dodged her attack, my heart pounding in my chest. We fought, a brutal dance of shadows in the night. The centuries of pent-up rage, the guilt, the despair, it all came pouring out. I fought not just for survival, but for a sliver of the humanity I thought I'd lost. I overpowered her, pinning her against the wall. My hands trembled as I looked into her eyes, the burning red now dimmed, fading. She looked almost human, vulnerable. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't." I hesitated. The bloodlust surged again, stronger than ever. But then, I remembered the young woman, the spark of life in her eyes. I released Ilara, stepping back into the shadows. "Live," I whispered, my voice hoarse, "and pray I never see you again." I turned and walked away, leaving her there, weak and alone. But as I disappeared into the fog, a terrifying thought struck me. The curse, the immortality, it wasn't tied to Ilara. It was tied to the first kill, and I